Welcome back to ThunderCats episode by episode. Today we're looking at episode 9, The Garden of Delights. Written by Barney Cohen and Julian P. Gardner, it premiered on the 19th of September, 1985. We open with a snake bird feeding its young as an earthquake takes out its tree. Seeing that this is taking place outside of the cat's lair, it cuts to Panthro and Tigra discussing the quakes. That it's not a large one, but several small ones. Tigra doesn't think it's anything major, but still insists on checking it out, with Panthro telling him to be careful.
Be careful.
As a cat.
Tigra stops outside the lair to admire it as the ground suddenly opens up and he falls in. Thankfully, Tigra hasn't attempted to rebel against Moses, so he lands safely on his feet. Using his whip, he pulls himself out of the fissure. He then comes across a strange hill, and a giant worm emerges from it and attacks him. Tigra tries to defend himself, but the worm grabs his whip and drags them both below. Once below, Tigra gets up without the worm in sight and starts exploring. He runs into a pair of mole men who burrow away in fear of him. Whereas Tigra isn't afraid, he's fascinated.
Mole-like people. Will the wonders of this place called Third Earth never cease?
Unfortunately, the mole men aren't friendly and ambush him to subdue him. They apparently want to talk to him.
What would you like to talk about?
There is no way this man isn't on the spectrum. They think Tigra is behind the quakes, but he confirms that he had the same suspicions about them. But they also confirm it wasn't them, as the quakes have destroyed their homes. The mole men take off, though, when a strange noise starts echoing through the tunnel. Tigra frees himself and hides just in time for the worm to pass by. Tigra follows it to an opening that leads into a strange underground garden with a sentient plant at the center of it. She introduces herself as Silky and tells Tigra this is the Garden of Delights, asking what his delight is. But Tigra seems unfocused. Something's affecting his mind. He tries to tell her that he's looking for sparkling slime, but she claims there's no slime in the garden. Tigra redoubles his efforts by qualifying that the slime is from a worm he's trying to find, with whatever is messing with his head taking more effect. Silky responds that there's no worms in the fruit she has, ignoring how unwell Tigra is acting. She tells him to sit down, and even though Tigra tells her that he doesn't have the time for it, it's like his body isn't in sync with his mind. So he sits anyways. She offers him a piece of fruit, claiming that his mind is weighed down with problems. Tigra accepts it and bites into the fruit. He enjoys it, but is clearly beginning to hallucinate. Even when a bird harms him, it doesn't bother him. Silky asks how he feels, and he tells her he feels like he's flying. His hallucination clearly becoming deeper as he thinks he's flying over Cat's lair. But it doesn't last long, and he falls crashing down, back to his body like it was an out-of-body experience. Honestly, he should just be happy he didn't run into the clockwork elves. When he gets up, though, the garden is gone and his focus is back, noticing the slime on his hand. He follows the worm again, but winds up right back at the garden. He's surprised to see Silky again, but she just asks if the fruit bit him. He tries to regain focus and resist the fruit, but his mind gives in and he asks her if she has any more. She gladly provides it to him, and this is her response. Okay, maybe it would have been better if he did run into the clockwork elves instead of this. But no, Silky is Mumm-Ra. Despite being his loathsome self, Tigra doesn't seem to notice. Mumm-Ra tells him he can have all the fruit he wants, for a price.
In the eye of thunder, bring it to me, Tigra, to Mumm-Ra.
Tigra walks off, and we change scenes to Panthro and WilyCat clearing out the trees with the tank. Tigra walks by, startling Panthro because he almost hit him with the tank. However, Tigra just walks by oblivious to it. Until Panthro calls out to him again, and Tigra dismissively just says that he's fine as he heads back to the lair. Cat and Panthro at a loss. Tigra enters the sword chamber and attempts to steal the sword, but it awakens and growls a warning at him. Scared of the sword's reaction, he flees from the room holding his head. Liona witnesses him fleeing and calls out to him, concerned. Back at Panthro and Cat, Panthro makes the foolish decision to let Cat drive the tank back to the lair. It goes about as well as you'd expect, with the tank falling into one of the recent fissures opened in the ground. They're both safe, but Panthro checks in anyways.
How do you feel?
With my fingers!
No joke. Be glad you still got them.
I'm starting to recognize where I got my sense of sarcasm from. Chitara and Lion-O call down to them, telling them that they're going to drop a line so they can climb out. Panthro says to do so, but instead for them to climb down. There's something there he wants to show them. The ThunderCats start following the slime Tigra did and notice there's multiple tunnels. Looks like they found the original source of all the quakes. Speaking of Tigra, though, he's trying to sleep but has Silky's voice playing on repeat in his head. We see it's infecting his dream and turning them into nightmares about falling. At the end of his wits, he enters the sword chamber again and this time steals the sword, even though it's growling a warning and clearly shaking his hand. We cut back to the others as they winch the tank out of the ground. Some people want the Batmobile, others want an X-Wing. I want the Thunder Tank. We follow back with Tigra as he flees the lair, sword in hand, and Mumm-Ra's voice echoing in his head. After the commercial break, we fade into Mumm-Ra's tomb as he examines the sword on a table, speaking on how the sword can't be used for evil, but surmises there must be a way. He grabs it, but the sword immediately wakes up and fights its way out of his grip, embedding itself in the sarcophagus and projecting the ThunderCat symbol in the pyramid. This frustrates Mumm-Ra.
What is your secret? Everything has a secret. Nothing is without a taint of evil spirit.
He decides that if he can't use the sword, then he'll just destroy it. He grabs the sword again and tries to pull it into the fire, but he can't maintain his grip. He transforms into his ever-living form and is finally able to grip the sword, placing it into the cauldron and chanting incantations until it calms down. Pleased with himself, he grabs the sword again and turns to his sarcophagus that reveals Tigra within it. Mumm-Ra winds back, preparing to strike Tigra with the sword, but then it flies immediately out of his grip once again. Mumm-Ra tells Tigra to leave and states there will be a way for him to use the sword. Time passes and the mutants enter the tomb. Mumm-Ra reveals the sword to them and they ask how he got it.
Let's just say I wormed it out of them.
Slythe tries to grab the sword, but it growls a warning at him, and he retracts his arm. Slythe and Mumm-Ra talk about how the sword won't work for them. Mumm-Ra hypothesizing that it may not just work for Lion-O, but perhaps another pure spirit could wield it. The mutants, of course, realize that leaves them out. Mumm-Ra talks about how he's heard of a warrior maiden, and Monkian leaps up like the stupid kid in class that finally knows the answer, Willa, the leader of the warrior maidens. We fade in to see Willa walking through the forest until Monkian throws the sword at her feet. She launches an arrow at him and he runs off. She leans over to grab the sword, and when she does, she's transported immediately to Mumm-Ra's pyramid. He tells her where she is, and asks her if she knows what she's holding. She identifies the sword, but doesn't know why Mumm-Ra has it. What follows is Mumm-Ra tempting Willa, telling her about the sword's power, trying to convince her to rule the universe alongside him, utilizing the sword's power for her own. Mumm-Ra tells her to try it, and Willa brings it to her face, saying she sees nothing special about the sword. But the crossguard curls, and the sword's sight beyond sight shows her that Tigra stole it. Mumm-Ra demands that she tell him what she saw. She denies it, but Mumm-Ra is having none of it.
You lie! Do not lie to Mumm-Ra!
Just a little fun fact here. This is something that my sister and I quote back and forth at each other all the time when we're just messing around. When one of us says something goofy, we always respond with, "You lie! Do not lie to Mumm-Ra!" It's just a lot of fun. Instead, Willa now says that she saw the future, a future where she is queen of the universe. She then tries to use the sword herself.
What is it? I heard him shout.
Seeing that it works, Mumm-Ra laughs as we fade out. We come back to the cat's lair where Snarf is cleaning up a mess Tigra made, complaining that it's extra work for him after already minding after Lion-O. Panthro is less occupied with Snarf's complaints though, and more with the fact that this behavior is very much so unlike Tigra. Panthro leaves the lair and finds Tigra loafing around in the woods, eating the fruit, stating that he'd offer Panthro some, but it's his last one. It's interrupted though with an arrow, and Tigra doesn't exactly react in a sober way.
Oh, wow! Beautiful!
Lion-O rushes out of the lair, declaring that they're under attack. Panthro tries to get Tigra and himself out of enemy fire, but Tigra's slow reflexes leads to them both being caught. Panthro looks at Tigra with a puzzled expression at his lack of concern for their current situation. Lion-O meets up with Cheetara and tells her that warrior maidens are attacking. She's obviously confused by it, but he tells her to grab the tank while he gets the sword. We then see Willa lecturing Tigra.
What friend would let his most powerful weapon be used by mutants? Well, your trick has backfired.
Willa is rightfully angry. Panthro, of course, doesn't know what she's talking about, and Tigra isn't answering. She wants to know why the sword was given to the mutants to be used against her and her people. Panthro is just shocked that she even has it. Lion-O rushes out to proclaim that the sword is missing, and Willa brings it up to Panthro in a threatening posture. Mumm-Ra appears and tells Lion-O that he has Panthro and Tigra hostage. Mumm-Ra further gloats that with the two hostages and the sword, there's nothing they can really do against him. He demands that Lion-O bend to his will. When Lion-O refuses, Mumm-Ra commands that the ThunderCats be confined in Cat's lair. We rejoin the ThunderCats in the confined space they're put in, and Panthro asks why Tigra isn't with them. Lion-O talks about how Tigra hasn't been himself lately. Cheetara wishes she knew why, and Panthro says he might be able to find out. Lion-O, though, is confused on how he could, considering Tigra himself built the room they're in, and there's no way out once the door seals. This is when Panthro drops some characteristically solid wisdom, stating that sometimes ingenuity is better than raw logic.
The time to plan for a rainy day is when the sun is shining.
He reveals that his symbol doubles as a flying camera. The shot then shows Mumm-Ra marveling at all of his ill-gotten gains, with Tigra asking for more fruit. Mumm-Ra laughs at this and asks what he could even give in return. Tigra then states that Mumm-Ra will never truly have it all so long as Lion-O lives. This gives Mumm-Ra pause. He concedes that Tigra is probably right, tells Willa to prepare for battle, and hands Tigra another fruit. However, Tigra only mimes eating it, a detail that Mumm-Ra misses, but Willa doesn't. None of them are aware, though, that Panthro's spy camera is recording Mumm-Ra and company. Panthro returns it to himself, and they all look back at the footage that was recorded. We pan down then to a set of ruins, Mumm-Ra announcing the beginning of the festivities while seated on a throne. Willa steps forward and unties Lion-O for this event, while Tigra continues to address Mumm-Ra as Silky. Mumm-Ra orders the mutants to silence him, but Tigra keeps talking, reminding Mumm-Ra that the sword will not respond to an evil command. Mumm-Ra, however, aggressively states that he knows that. He gestures for Willa to attack Lion-O, but gets a response he didn't expect.
What?
Tigra now stands up, back in his right mind and taunting Mumm-Ra by name. Willa calls out to Lion-O and tosses the sword to him.
Thunder! 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 ThunderCats!
The sword gives the ThunderCats the opening to free themselves with help from Nada, while simultaneously Snarf and the twins arrive with the Elder's weapons. Now that everyone's armed again, a fight breaks out. I'm going to show you my favorite part of it. What a dork. Lion-O snags Willa out of the way just before Slythe can land on her. Realizing they aren't winning this, the mutants teleport away. But Mumm-Ra is still there, and attacks Lion-O and Willa. Lion-O directs Willa out of harm's way and deflects Mumm-Ra's attack back at him, driving him away. Time passes and we rejoin the ThunderCats back at the lair, with Tigra apologizing. But Panthro rejects it, for a very unique reason.
Not you, Tigra. That was some other person. We're thankful you had the strength to pull yourself out of it in time.
Following Panthro's credit to Tigra, Lion-O praises Panthro for his ingenuity after being reminded of the word by Chitara. This leads to Snarf asking an important question.
Were you scared, Lion-O?
I knew the sword couldn't be used against me. Panthro reminded me of Jaga's warning.
But were you scared?
Darn right I was.
And with that, we end the episode. Writer's commentary by Barry Cohen. I've only written 2 animated episodes of anything ever. One was the episode of Masters of the Universe called Evil Seed, in which Skeletor and He-Man team up. The other was ThunderCats The Garden of Delights. Both of them caused tongues to wag, and I'm very proud of that. Script editor's commentary from Peter Lawrence. Tigra's drug-taking episode. More, as Coesis wrote, about instant gratification. I didn't edit this episode, but my memory is that no one thought much about the drug-taking analogy until the script was finalized and went into recording. The sound guys and actors, of course, riffed on it instantly, as did the audience. My view? Drug-taking or not a bad message for the audience, and one that no show now would ever address. Tigra was always enigmatic, and a spare part in my view. Don't forget that Jules Boss put his own pseudonym on this script. I'm not sure how much of it he actually wrote. Somewhere, there's a shadow of a memory that Jules wanted me to work with Barney, but it was just too difficult. David Crichton, Hear the Roar, the unofficial and unauthorized guide to ThunderCats. I keep forgetting to tell you guys where I'm getting these. A link to the book that this is all referenced from will be in the description. Now my thoughts. This is a fan favorite episode, like many of the first season tend to be. What I find interesting is that no one apparently thought of the drug analogy until the script was finalized. At least that's what's being said here. You see, the co-writer on this script isn't somebody we can really ask about it. Julian, aka Jules Bass, had long since passed away before this behind-the-scenes info was ever written down. It's possible that this drug-related reference was his intention from the start. For those of you wondering who the Coesis individual mentioned is, he was the child psychologist that reviewed all the scripts for the series. He wanted to make sure proper lessons were taught in these episodes and that nothing harmful was communicated. I find it odd, though, that the idea was to communicate the downfalls of instant gratification. This story does not at all communicate that. Let me sidebar for a minute, though, because I need to put this out here before I forget, because good lord, I have a lot to say about this episode as a whole. During the fight scene at the end of the episode, when Mumm-Ra attacks Lion-O, it cuts to footage from the intro. This is not common for the show. It's happened a couple of times in it, but it's not a normal thing. I don't know why this happened, but I sure wish I did. There's also something else I forgot to mention, so you get to hear this in post-audio editing. Hi. When this episode first aired on Cartoon Network's Toonami block, they started it in the middle of the episode, where you cut to Mumm-Ra's tomb. To this day, I don't know why or how that happened, but I can tell you this. The child version of me was very, very confused. Also, ThunderCats started the Toonami block, so you're welcome, weebs, for what it's worth. Does anybody else remember when this happened? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, back to the main discussion. I have to note that Peter Lawrence is absolutely wrong about how no show now would address drug use. Plenty have since ThunderCats. In fact, I got members of my server, which you should join by the way, to list off cartoons since the 80s that tackled this very topic. Specifically, I focused on episodes that were aired after this one was for ThunderCats. A few off the list are Captain Planet, that awful cartoon all-stars movie, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, Jim and the Holograms, Transformers Prime, Spectacular Spider-Man, Cops, Ninja Turtles, Tiny Toons, Capital Critters, and Young Justice, just to name a few. And that's just in animation. I'm sure just about every sitcom has had an episode or two about it. I personally think, though, of all the ones I've seen, including ThunderCats, the best one was Brave Star's The Price. I've linked it to you, and you should check it out when you get the chance. If it's not popping up on the little thingamawhat's in the corner, check the description. Just to be clear, this is not to knock Mr. Lawrence. I just like talking about this stuff. This is the only piece of ThunderCats at the time that was ever touched by somebody who previously worked on He-Man as well. Despite some surface similarities, the shows aren't really all that similar, so seeing a writer from that show do a script for this one is interesting. He sure likes plant-based peril, though. This episode is often playfully ripped on by fans due to the imagery and overall message. Believe it or not, this aspect of Tigra will pop up again in the next season. It seems that he's got a bit of an addictive personality. Let's talk about Tigra. While not always the most bountiful written Thundercat, and while Mr. Lawrence considers him a spare part, I disagree. We find out later that Tigra was shy as a child, which explains some of his traits. Keep in mind, he's an architect, a chemist, and a general scientific explorer. Every friend group has a Tigra in it. The studious nerd with serious passion for whatever their special interests are. What I like, though, is that unlike cartoons with nerd characters at the time, Tigra isn't portrayed as a coward of any sort. This isn't a stereotype that got challenged too publicly, I feel, until Billy from Power Rangers. And of course Donatello from Ninja Turtles. You know, I like the Toidles. And hey, both Billy and Tigra had episodes of these characters being brainwashed into stealing a weapon. But it's likely that it's Tigra's mind and the burdens of those churning thoughts that led him to give in to the fruit. I'm not going to deny the spiritually oppressive atmosphere Mumm-Ra created wasn't a catalyst for it, though. People like Tigra often keep their troubles and worries internal. Whether it be because they just don't think people will understand, because they have some toxic idea of masculine stoicism, or because they think it'll burden their friends. Sometimes those people will resort to other stimuli in order to unburden their minds, whether it be alcohol, drugs, or even chasing adrenaline high. These outlets often lead to destruction, addiction, or both. There's also the possibility that his mind wasn't just burdened, but he also had no idea how to talk about it with other people. This can also lead to relying on forms of escapism. We'll talk more later about how this show tackled Tigra's addiction, but first I'd like to talk more at length about the characters. We'll start with Lion-O. He doesn't really do much in this episode, but him admitting at the end that even with the knowledge that the sword couldn't hurt him, he was still scared was a good touch. A lesson a lot of people haven't learned, especially kids, is that courage isn't having a lack of fear. It's acting even when afraid. What Lion-O spoke about can be identified as general anxiety. Think about when you're called, messaged, or anything else where you know you didn't do anything wrong, but you're still worried. It's like that sometimes. Kids seeing that adults share these feelings doesn't inherently mean that they'll think less of their parents or other adults. Oftentimes, it leads to them trusting the adults more. This isn't just with kids either. Other adults are like this too. I've seen this in my own life. A lot of people have been scared of me or afraid to talk to me. Why? Because I'm known as the angry, yelling guy due to a lot of awful situations and people I've had to deal with. But when they start spending time around me, talking to me about their interests or listening to mine as you are now, they start realizing I'm not just some shouting, angry person. I do that when I think it's needed, and Lord knows I've made my mistakes, but opening up to people around me, being more unguarded in certain ways, it's helped me connect to people better. It's a good thing to internalize. Let's move on to Panthro. Lion-O may be my favorite, but Panthro is the coolest Thundercat. For many reasons. He and Tigra are pretty close, having an extremely functional work relationship on top of being friends. Is why Panthro showed the most worry about Tigra. He knows him better than the others do. And when he approaches Tigra, it's not out of anger and condemnation, but concern. Even when he had every right to be angry. These characters aren't just one-dimensional stock, and the way they're written displays that. Speaking of how Panthro is written, you'll notice a bit of a theme here with him. Both in The Terror of Hammerhand and here, Panthro pulls out a modification or a device that assists in the episode's goal. At first glance, some people may think this is lazy writing. Deus Ex Machina, I think it's called. But I actually disagree. You see, Panthro is a master martial artist, a mechanic, and the muscle of the team, but he's also an engineer. And if you know engineers, they're always tinkering with something. Think of Wheeljack from G1 Transformers without the mad scientist influence. That's Panthro. If he's not manning the main console, he's in the mechanic bay altering or building something. This is just normal for him. It's further backed by the philosophy he mentions in the episode. You'll see many more of Panthro's inventions as the series goes on. Heck, he regularly modifies his nunchucks. As someone who knows how to use that weapon, it's essentially a peasant flail. It's not the most effective weapon out there. My personal headcanon is that Panthro uses a weapon like that so it gives him a reason to improve and modify it. Next up, we have Willa. The thing I like the most about this character is that she's not some helpless damsel just because her and her people aren't as technologically advanced as the other characters are. She's intelligent, cunning, and knows when someone's trying to play her. The fact that she turned it around and played a being several millennia her senior is a testament to this. She didn't need to brag about it either. She just gave him a wry smile before wrecking his plans. Willa's great. We stand a queen. Also of note that Willa's anger towards Tigra is genuinely justified. She's seen a fraction of what the sword can do, and had built a good relationship with the ThunderCats. The belief that one of them would hand such a weapon over to her enemies would absolutely sting. Thankfully, Willa's not an idiot and clearly realized Tigra was being manipulated in the end. Moving on to Mumm-Ra, this is where the series starts fleshing out how he's been operating on Third Earth for so long. We've seen Mumm-Ra take other forms before, but this just further establishes it as a pattern of his. Later on, we'll learn that some of the mythical characters of Third Earth are just Mumm-Ra in a different disguise. Think Roger from American Dad, but somehow more malicious. Yes, even more malicious than Ricky Spanish. See, Mumm-Ra wasn't lying when he said he's been ruling Third Earth for as long as he has. The way he's been doing it, though, is without direct control. Keep the natives scared, influence the others for evil, and he wins. That's how he's done it. It's why when Willa was transported to his pyramid, she had no idea where she was or who he is. It doesn't benefit Mumm-Ra for the entirety of the world to know who he is. In fact, it's very reflective of Ephesians 6:12, where it says, "For we war not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." That's what Mumm-Ra is, especially considering who he serves. As egotistical and maladjusted as he is, he recognizes that putting that on display would only further cripple his ability to continue to rule. Mumm-Ra wants the power of the sword because evil is never satisfied with power it already has. On top of that, it also wants to corrupt whatever good that still exists. This is Mumm-Ra's frustration with the sword. He can't use it, and he can't corrupt it. Currently, it brings him anger. Later on, it'll bring him fear. Like all other corruptors, though, when direct confrontation fails, he tries it by proxy, bringing in Willa to wield the sword in his name, assuming that level of separation will bring him what he wants. However, also like other corruptors, he doesn't think his plan fully through, and assumes everyone deep down is just as evil, twisted, and power-hungry as he is. In retrospect, he probably shouldn't have pissed off a girl boss. We're now going to, as usual, talk about the sword. It's the center point of the series and the linchpin of everything, so it's just going to be something we talk about almost every episode. We learn new things about this weapon all the time. Here we learn that it's not just Lion-O who can wield the sword. Any just person can. And to be clear, that doesn't mean anyone with zero flaws or who has done no wrong. Both Willa and Lion-O are flawed just like everything in creation. One may even argue about the lie Willa tells Mumm-Ra, leading to a more negative aspect of her. As though the sword wouldn't work for her or shouldn't work for her because of it. But upon further thought, I don't agree. While lying is generally considered a bad thing, it's often the situation someone is put in that determines the nature and intent of it. Lying about your friend, bearing false witness for malicious reasons, that would definitely shift it to being wrong. However, in situations where you're dealing with an evil, malicious person like Willa is, deceiving them to save your life or the lives of others isn't wrong. There's even examples of people doing this in the Bible where it's not condemned. The context is what matters. It's a tool, and its determination of good or evil relies solely on the intention and result of the action. The same actually applies to the Sword of Omens. Anyone decent can use it, but even if a decent person tries to do evil with it, they deal with the same outcome Mumm-Ra or others do. Back to the sword itself, though, there's another interesting aspect of it I haven't touched on yet that is directly tied to the amount of people who can use it. The very trait of anyone just being able to wield it is actually uncommon for most magic swords. They usually require a very specific, chosen wielder, and it will not work for anyone else. We also see that the sword will even growl at ThunderCats if they're doing wrong. It wrenching itself out of Mumm-Ra's hands and making him miserable is an added quality too. Remember, the sword's purpose is to destroy evil, and it's sentient. Naturally, it's not going to want to be around Mumm-Ra. Some people may be asking why it isn't currently turning him into Raiden like it did in the Mumm-Ra episode, but I think they're missing that this is clearly harming him as he holds it. It's pretty clear the reason Mumm-Ra panicked in the Mumm-Ra episode was due to him not expecting that reaction from the sword. Here is a bit different. He knows it's coming. I'd also like to speculate that Mumm-Ra's chanting had nothing to do with the sword calming down. It becomes very apparent in later episodes that the sword's power easily dwarfs that of Mumm-Ra and his masters. To me, it reads more of the sword just calming down on its own because Mumm-Ra's not touching it. And when he does so again and tries to strike Tigra, it once again forces itself out of his grip. The sword can't be used for evil, and that includes striking down someone defenseless, much less a ThunderCat. This is only one of the 2 reactions the sword has when someone swings at a ThunderCat with it with malintent. You'll learn the other reaction in a future episode. When it comes to the final fight, that's where Mumm-Ra's arrogance led him to missing the fatal flaw in his plan. Even if it's someone else swinging the sword, even a noble person, that doesn't change the fact that the sword cannot be used for evil. The law of the sword has nothing to do with who is wielding it. The concept gets explored in a later episode, but it'll be a while before we get there. Bear with me. Now is the time we pull back and talk about the episode's theme. We've already talked a bit about how the drug use was handled in the episode concerning how Tigra gave into it, but I also think it's important to talk about how the others reacted to it. Because that's important too. You have to remember, this was in 1985. The war on drugs was in full swing. The general culture at the time wasn't just to demonize drug use and dealers, but the users as well. Mental health and the medical aspect of addiction is something we're barely doing better about 40 years later. You'd expect the reaction of the other characters to be condemning Tigra, punishing him, or at least chastising him. But that's not what happens. He's regretful of everything he did under that influence. Instead of coming down on Tigra, he's met with empathy, with Panthro even telling him that it wasn't him that did all those things, but someone else. Acknowledging that these substances alter the personalities of the individuals who become addicted to them, causing them to act in ways they normally wouldn't. They're just happy that their friend is back, healthy and safe. It's important to realize that sometimes people just need help getting back where they were. Granted, sometimes people are so ingrained in the idea that they need the drug as a necessity that they have to hit complete rock bottom before they accept the help offered to them. This episode, though, just further demonstrates what it's like to have people genuinely care about you, and who don't hold grudges when their friend has been manipulated. Having a solid support system makes all the difference in situations like getting a friend out of an addictive mindset, as well as patience from the people who care about those affected. It's a good example to set for younger audiences, or heck, even for adults. This episode also doesn't take time to sit down, hold our hand, and explain to us in detail that the fruit and Mumm-Ra are very, very bad. It doesn't need to. It's a perfect example of show, don't tell. A very well thought out and well written episode. However, I think in a more modern retelling it could be expanded more. See, it's not just drugs or alcohol that people can get addicted to in destructive ways. Anything can be an addiction. Movies, shows, comics, toys, parties, essentially anything. When used for its proper purpose, there's nothing inherently wrong with those things, including drugs. Like many other things, they're a tool. How you use it is important. Though I do understand why a cartoon for kids may focus more on drug use specifically. Kids doing drugs actually alters their brain chemistry since their brains are still developing. It's a justifiable thing to tell kids specifically to avoid completely unless prescribed by a medical professional. Enough of my yapping though. What did you think about the episode? Any thoughts about what I've said or personal experiences you want to share? Let me know in the comments below. And I hope you'll join me next time when we go over Mandora, the Evil Chaser. If you want to support the channel, feel free to join the Patreon or memberships listed in the description. You're also welcome to join the community Discord. See you next time, and take care.